All right, team, welcome back to the 6-week nutritional program that you can sell to your clients. This week, we're going to look at fats and how to read food labels. This is the last week, so get excited. Now, team, like I've said all the other videos, this is a part of a series. This is one of the last videos, so if you haven't seen the preceding videos, do go back and watch them because everything compounds on each other. The information from last week's builds up on information for this week. There should be a link underneath this video that has everything you need in it. It has all the documents, it has all the sheets I need you to print out, it has the scripts, it has everything that we're basing everything off in it. So if you're not following along, I heavily suggest that you do. So, just like every other week, we go to step 1, which is our check-in. We should be checking with our client how they did on their checklist sheet. We should be checking in with our client how they went with their 5 colors of vegetables. We should be looking at any issues they're having. If we're in a big group class setting, we might get people to call out some really good things that happened and some really maybe perhaps troubles they ran into. Maybe their disruptive habits are coming back up. Maybe their positive habits are working really well. Whatever. It doesn't matter, but this is the time to collect documents. It's the time to be weighing your clients in, to be doing the tape measurements on anything that if they're wanting stuff smaller or larger, things that we've discussed before. And remember, this is the time to talk less. Let your clients relay their story, let them tell you of their experience, let them do all the stuff that makes them feel involved. Try your best not to monologue to them during this time. Very important, okay? When to help your client engage in conversation, if they're not very chatty, ask open-ended questions. Don't ask questions that result in a yes or a no. So instead of saying, did you have a good week this week with your nutrition, which would suggest a yes or a no, say, tell me something good that happened with your nutrition this week. See the difference? Important. So fats, team. Fats are a little bit tricky, only because they're similar to carbohydrates in that they're broken down into different settings, and they're also a little bit harder to measure. So with proteins, it's pretty evident when we're looking at what kind of different proteins we can have. And similar true with carbohydrates. There's vegetables, there's carbohydrates, and there's sugars. There's different types of carbs. They're very physical things. Fats can be a bit tricky because they can be in fluid-esque form as well. So it's harder to measure stuff sometimes. So just keep that in mind. What I need you to relay to the client, there's some information in the document. One of the things is that fats are incredibly energy dense. So for 1 unit of fat is about 9 calories of energy. They're very, very dense, where comparatively carbohydrates are about 4 calories of energy per unit, roughly. Fats are broken down into 4 different types. There's saturated fats, monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, and trans fats that we'll look at in a minute. Fats are responsible for energy. They're stored on our body because their energy is so important in us. And they're also often responsible for inflammatory and anti-inflammatory responses. So the ability for the body to inflame, to rush blood to a site that needs healing, and to relax again, okay? And an imbalance of those 2 things can lead to clients being more inflamed more often than they need, or have issues with being in an anti-inflammatory state. Say that 10 times fast. But the point is that it can be a little bit confusing. So what I want you to do is look over the document, make sure you've read this one quite well because there can be a little bit of overlay, but try to keep it as simple as we can. We're mainly going to talk about anti-inflammatory and inflammatory fats, and we're going to break down the 4 types of fats that your clients are going to look out for. So interactively, I'm a big fan of writing this one out. You can use a whiteboard, a bit of paper, or you can just discuss it. It is okay if you don't want to go too far into depth. But remember, there's 4 types. There's saturated fats, there's monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, and trans fats. Now, there is an easy way to remember these, team. We're going to try to keep it not too clinical. We're going to keep it broad because you can deep dive into these big macronutrients and get lost in those things. This is why there's degrees around nutrition instead of just 6-week courses. So saturated fats, I want you to think about a car park that has no car spots available. Every single carport that is in that space is full with cars. Saturated meaning lots of, or stacked, or full. So when you look at it from a chemical point of view, from a makeup point of view, all of its hydrogen bonds are locked together, they're stacked. Not that you need to tell the client that. They can just think about a car park. Okay? When we look at monounsaturated fats, mono means one, mono. Unsaturated means it's not every single car spot is full. So since it's mono, it means one of the car spots is empty. So you can park your car in one of those spots. So it isn't as dense of a chemical bond. It's not quite as full. Poly meaning many, means that there's many car parks that are free. More than one, many. Okay? And each of these fats behave differently in the body. We also have trans fats, which is a man-made fat, which is where we get something like a poly or a monounsaturated fat, and we force it to be saturated. So we put in a car or a truck that's not meant to be there to make it a saturated fat. And we'll get to why that's not necessarily a good thing in a moment. Each of these fats do a slightly different thing in the body. Okay? Saturated fats are pro-inflammatory. So these are really good at causing inflammation. Think of stuff like meat from fat on the edge of a steak, or the skin of chicken, or fats that are very dense. Physically, I can hold it. That's a good sign for saturated fats because they're dense. They're quite firm as a material. When we look at monounsaturated fats, they're a little bit more fluidy. So think of like your peanut oils and your olive oils and almond oils. They're not quite a fluid, but they're not quite a solid either. And these are usually leaning more towards the anti-inflammatory space. However, they're not intense, they're mild. They're mildly anti-inflammatory. And then we look at our polyunsaturated fats, and they are incredibly anti-inflammatory. They're really good at bringing inflammation down. These are things like fish oils, team, flax seeds. They're specific in what they are. And again, in the document, we'll have a list of all the different types of fats that are related to each of the three main fat types. Again, we're not quite looking at trans fats just yet. Most of your clients are gonna eat saturated fats the majority of the time, and most of the populace does. And in our fact sheet, I suggest that some of the stats in Australia at least represent that most people are at a ratio of 20:1 from inflammatory, stuff that inflames you, to anti-inflammatory, which is quite out. Usually we want somewhere between 3:1 or 1:1 ideally. So when we're looking at our fats, the reason people sometimes struggle this week is because we're trying to balance our intake between these three main ones. Stuff that brings inflammation, stuff that's mildly anti-inflammatory, and stuff that's quite anti-inflammatory is how we want to balance this out, okay? In the dossier and in the document, have a little read through these different types, but the best way I've always found, and the way I use them most with clients, is I tell them about the car park and I tell them what each of these types of fats do. The good news is after we talk to them about this, we're going to give them our fat list sheet for the week, just like our proteins and our carbs and our vegetable sheet, and it will suggest what kind of fats they want to play with, which ones are probably better for them and which ones are probably worse for them, or good, better, best, as we like to talk about here. And then in the document, it will tell you what fats are what, just to help make it even easier again. We're very likely going to touch on trans fats because it is a touchy topic. Trans fats are man-made, and they were originally created to help with shelf life. So when you make a trans fat, it makes stuff last a lot longer on the shelf, which is fantastic for the business of selling a product if it can last 10 times as long. But the actual process of making trans fats is really, really bad for people. There's a lot of supporting evidence to suggest that it can induce really, really negative health effects. There has been indication that it can increase cancer risks for the extreme sense, but they're really, really, really bad. So bad, in fact, that they have to have it labeled on the foods so that way it's clear that it is inside this product. And usually you want to avoid it mainly at all times. I understand that sometimes you can't always, but tell your clients how bad those things are and how to avoid them. Usually found in more processed foods. So the more processed, usually the more likely it has inflammatory fats, so saturated fats, and more likely to have this trans fats. Now, do keep in mind, you should still get inflammatory. You do want to be the ability to be inflamed. We just want to source it and balance it between the whole foods and the other types of fats we've just discussed. So it might take you a little bit of time to get your head around that one, team, but very valuable for your client to know. Keep it simple, keep it short, keep it to the point, because you can deep dive on this stuff and it's important for you to stay within your scope of practice. The real skill, the really important skill I want you to do with your client this week is go over the importance of reading food labels. So a critique you've probably already run into, there's a point of confusion for clients, and it's particularly around carbs. Since we use cups for carbs and thumbs for fats, some food items don't fall into a category where it can be measured. So if you say, hey, I need you to have cups of carbs for your ingestion, and I say, well, I can fill my handful of Maltesers and M&Ms just as easily as I can a handful of rice, but obviously the chocolate's going to be far richer in calories, right? So how does that work? The good news is we have a solution. We just had to slowly develop our client up to a point where now it's not too much to overload them. On your food labels, there will be serving sizes that will give you the rough guesstimate of one serving size. So for example, if I was to look at like celery compared to soda, 40 grams of sugar is in a can of soda, which is like 2 serving sizes of sugar, versus celery that's like 3 kilograms of celery, because they're so disproportional. But on their packaging, it tells you the quantities of stuff. In a standard chocolate bar, so a family chocolate bar, 4 blocks of chocolate is about 1 serving, and it says so on the label. So what you're going to do with your client now is you're going to ideally get items that they commonly use, or you ask your client to bring in stuff that they like to eat. And we're going to go over the main things we're looking for when it comes to food label reading. The trick is that food labels can be very confusing, and sometimes they are designed to do so because it's better to keep you confused and not really know what you're putting in your body. Okay, but we're going to break it down super simply, and on your whiteboard you can write down the things we're looking for. Thing 1 is the serving size, kind of what we just discussed. How many serves are in the thing? So if I buy a pack of Tim Tams, or if I get, for example, this container of milk, when I look at the milk, inside this container, every 250 milliliters is conceived as 1 serving. So that would be my equivalent of 1 handful. Or if the client knows the exact amount of calories they're meant to be having, which some of them will elect to do, you can use the actual serving size to tell you how many servings they need of this a day. But to keep it simple, 1 serving here is 1 serving here. Make sense? Same with this. So on the back of this peanut butter, it tells me that there is 21.4 servings in this bucket, and every serving is about 1 teaspoon or 22 grams. So we're going to say 1 teaspoon is the equivalent of 1 thumb of fats in this case. That's the first thing. So find something they like, even bring in some items to kind of describe to them. The thing with serving size is that the trick is some things are not built equal. So you might buy a thing of orange juice and inside it's actually 4 servings, and traditionally you might find a client will drink the whole thing thinking it's at 1 serve, when in reality they're drinking 4 serves. Something to keep in mind. We want to look at the energy density inside the serving size. It'll tell you how many calories are in it. High calories for weight loss is usually not very good. High calories for people gaining weight is usually good. But if it looks like it's a really high calorie content, so example, this being mainly a fats, it has energy servings of 510 kilojoules per serving, which is high, but as it should be, because fats are really condensed with energy. They're very, very, very energy rich. They digest slowly, but they're very energy rich. That's their job. They're good at being energy rich. It's why we store it. We want to look to see the fat content on our item of food. We are looking for trans fats. We want ideally no trans fats. And then we want lower saturated fats, ideally, because those are our inflammatory fats, and I'd rather you source them off visible things. So for example, in this one, there is no traces of trans fats. And in this one, there is very low. There's 1.7 grams of saturated fats per serving in this. So that's quite high for saturated fats on this particular serving, or at least it's something to consider. When I look at all of them, it tells me what each of there's less than a gram of poly, less than a gram of mono, and there's 1.7 grams of saturated. So this peanut butter is more, at least this peanut butter, is more saturated fats than anything else. So when your client is documenting this, they document it as saturated fats. We want to look for low added sugars, if I can, no added sugars. Why? Because sugars are high in energy. They increase the calories of stuff. So when we want to lose weight, we ideally don't want to mess with our calories too much. We're leaning more towards calorie rich and nutritionally rich instead of calorie rich and nutritionally poor. So sometimes sugars can be snuck into stuff to make it more energy full or more calorie full than we want. If we're a weight gain client, or your student is or client is a weight gain client, we want to direct them more towards things that are going to help them boost up those calorie inputs. We're looking for high fiber and we're looking for high protein. Proteins are not well stored in the body, as we know. They don't get stored very well. It's like that bucket with a hole in it. That's eventually it just leaks out. Same with our fibers. Our fibers are not particularly, they're very, very good for our GI tract. They're very, very good at helping us move food in our body. It helps us with our immune system. It helps us with our stools. Fantastic. It also keeps us full and it's not particularly calorie dense. So we're looking at the protein servings of stuff as well as the high fibers of stuff. For example, each one of these protein bars, one bar is one serving. So that makes it nice and easy. Each bar is going to give me about 20 grams of protein. Okay, so depending on the size of you, that might be one serving size of protein, give or take. Okay. We want low sodium. We didn't discuss much about sodium, but sodium and water have a very direct relationship. We were not going to look too much into it, but when we talk about sodium and water, high salts can lead to dehydration, and higher salty stuff may affect our water balance in our body. So we're looking traditionally for low sodium. We can comment a little bit on those things. Again, not in this program, but something for you to look into as you progress through your journey. And then I want a short ingredient list. Really, ingredients. Why do I want short ingredients? Because the less stuff in it, the more stuff that I can understand that is in this thing, the better it's going to be. If I'm looking at a bunch of incredibly scientific long words, it makes me fearful because I don't really know what's in it. So it's quite concerning when my item of food that should just be a protein bar or a candy apple or something is full of stuff that I've never heard of. If you ever have a look at the back of an energy drink, and if you know half of those words, it's always a bit more than I'm willing to ingest. However, they are delicious. So keep stuff short with your client. So when you're going through this with your client, serving size, energy, low to no added sugar, high fibers, high proteins, low sodium, and keep those lists short. The more confusing the list, the less you understand, the more problematic it is, because you don't really know what's in it and what's going in your body for the client. Now let's look at the upsell. So we have done functionally all of the things. We've done water, we've done steps, we've done portions, we've done protein, we've done carbs, we've done veg, we've done fats, and we've done all the stuff that encompasses that, like food labels. We've done your different good, better, best, your ready, willing, ables. All functionally, the concepts are now finished. The client is functionally done with their fats this week. Your challenge for them is to get them to balance whatever the fat servings you have for them, whether that be 9 or it be 18 or whatever it is. You're trying to get them to balance it evenly between the 3 fat types. That's their challenge. That's why it's a little bit tricky. But they functionally have everything sorted now, yeah? So now we've got to upsell them. How do we continue them to stay with us in what we're trying to do for them? Because 9 weeks is not enough time. Let's be real. It's enough time to give them the general outlook of how to do stuff, but they won't see massive change in 9 weeks. They will feel amazing, but you won't see huge weight loss in that time. Okay, so you've got a couple of different options when we're looking to upsell. Personally, I have a second half to this program. So I have my weeks 1 to 6 is all about fundamentals. And then I have a 7 to 11 that we then sell how to implement this stuff and not drop off, because the mental side of nutrition is really, really important. We do not have a program of that for you. There's one on our website, on our YouTube channel that has it for the client, but there's not one that I have from the vise of a PT training somebody. You are welcome to watch my videos and make your own one up. However, in the next 7 to 11 weeks in that period, that some of that stuff is out of your scope of practice. So you must educate yourself up to be able to provide some of this service. It's why we don't include it in this 1 to 6 week program. There's always that. We always want to give them the next half of the program. That's why there's not a week 7 to talk about their fats. We're incentivizing them to come and talk to you in a one-on-one or a paid setting or a continued learning setting. Because when we give them the sheet for this week, we might even give them a backup sheet. We give them all the information sheets and we shake their hand and say, well done, see you never. They still want to check in with you to see that they're doing the right thing, and that is how we're going to get them into the next round of whatever it is we're selling. Remember, it's always continued education. After you graduate, you then get your master's and you get your PhD. There's always another thing to sell. So that's one option. We have the second half of this program that currently is not available. We have personal training. So now that they've got their nutrition up to snuff, it can change our approach to PT. Now they trust you because what you've given them works, what you've given them is evidently effective. So now we can funnel them into personal training. However, not everyone will want to do that, but that's a great funnel to start putting clients. We can funnel them into your group class. A lot of the clients from personal training eventually go into the group class. So you're starting to build this community setting for people to find their way into your community. So the number one sell that will work in your business is creating a community of like-minded clients. If your group class is functionally a big group of people who follow your processes and understand the teachings that you have, they have a click and usually they'll stick together. Very, very important to make a click for people to join into, because it's community that keeps people training long term. Number one rule is if you don't, you will do whatever your friends are doing as a rule of thumb. So if all of your friends are in this group class, because this is where you've been going for 2 hours or 1 hour a day every day for the last 6 months, or in this case 6 weeks, you will develop friendships and you want to hang out with those people, and what's a better time than to go to your group classes? So very, very important. Those are my usual 3 options. Personal training, some people will want to be reiterated with this program and you can go through it with them again in a one-on-one setting. You can send them to your group training or perhaps a group nutrition class. Maybe you can upgrade them from the personal nutrition to group nutrition. And eventually, once you've gotten the first 6 weeks down to a fine art, you can start developing your next set of 7 to 11 weeks where you continue on the process. Again, you are welcome to base your 7 to 11 weeks off the programs that we have on this website, or you can develop your own after you get your education. Do keep in mind of your own scope of practice, because I will not be guiding you through that process. Now that you have finished with the client, you can decide if the rates and what you're charging them are going to increase if they decide to stay on board. Depends again on your confidence levels, depends on your skill levels, and depends what upsells you're using. But make sure that if your skill set requires higher payment because you're more niche or you're better, you're more skilled than you were, make sure you're charging appropriately, team. The last thing I want you to do is undercharge your services, because people trust you less if you're weirdly cheap but the service seems really good. They get a little bit reluctant, which is an interesting fact for you. Another big upsell, I mentioned that group settings is really important. If you've been tailoring your skill sets with all the personal side of the personal side of nutrition, you're doing lots of one-on-one nutrition, and now you feel confident enough you could do it in a group settings is the majority of where the money is at in the big sense. For example, if I'm charging my clients $50 a week for 6 weeks, well, in this case it's 5 weeks because we don't charge for week 1. In a PT session, a one-on-one, there's only so many hours in a day you can do that. But if I run this program twice a year and I go $50 a head each week for a group of 10 people, I've 10x'd my business model, but it's the same amount of time. So as you get confident, I always encourage people to move more towards group training sessions. However, without the skills developed from personal, it's very challenging because you just don't know what's coming and you don't know how a group will behave, but we can practice the skills in a personal setting. So step 6, let's prepare for next week. There is no next week. You just need to make sure that your legal documents are all sorted out. You need to make sure that you are collecting any photos or any of the promo materials from the group that you want to use, if there's before and after photos, or if people have lost a certain amount of weight or gained a certain amount of muscle and that you want to advertise that. Very, very important. Again, make sure you have an idea of where your clients are going and try to, whatever it is that you're trying to sell, try to get the clients to, again, buy on that day, because they're never going to be more excited than in that moment because you've had the time to build it up, okay? So try to sell it as that program ends. However you wish to do it, there's some elegance to it so you don't come across as a greasy salesperson. But if you truly believe the next part of this program or wherever you're trying to funnel them into is going to help the client, it's not as greasy. It feels you're truly trying to help them. And that's the cue for a good salesman, is make sure that you're actually give a shit about the product, you actually give a shit about the client, and you truly believe the product is going to help the client. If you don't think it's going to help them, don't offer them anything. Okay, team, let's do our final thoughts. A quick summary of what this program's been. So this program is all about, it's a 6-week program that you can sell to your clients right now whilst learning about your scope of practice as a personal trainer. It is based off a bunch of information from Precision Nutrition, as well as my own experience and a couple others coaches' experiences in the nutritional setting. It's all about keeping you in your scope of practice and educating you, as well as helping you add some extra skills to your personal training or coaching abilities to help you make more money. That's really what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to do, educate you so you can be better. I have put every single link to all these documents under every video. Please read the big document that tells you every single step. Make sure you print out these sheets to give to your clients. It's really important that they have something to do to track themselves, and practice, 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 practice until you're a master at this stuff, team. If you know any other coaches or PTs who would value from this kind of stuff, send it their way. Try to help the person next to you. That's the only cost I ever ask. These things are all free, but I ask you to try to help the person next to you, because if we all grow together, we can make this industry of coaching and personal training far more real and far heavily respected, because we can provide better services. I do encourage you to educate yourself further in nutrition. You will need very good nutritional skills on longevity going forward. I personally like Precision Nutrition, which is an online website, which the link that I've provided to you will send you to if you choose to use it. And if not, if you find your own thing, send it to me. I love to hear about the different educational platforms that are going at the minute. If there's a better one than Precision Nutrition, I'm happy to look into it. So thank you so much for your time, team. Message me with any queries or any questions, and go and make some money. Hey, go make this profession fun, have a bit of fun, and just enjoy it, team. It's one of the best things you'll ever do.